How are you fine folks doing this morning? It is Tristan here from Ingram Orchids and More. Haven't made a video in a little while, and I apologize for that. The past week or so, my family has been sick. The wife and the kids have come down with some cases of strep throat and ear infection, so we haven't been doing a whole lot and hadn't had a whole lot of time to get outside and make some videos. But today I thought I would make a quick introduction video and show y'all some things that have been going on. So, as y'all know, my favorite orchid, of course, is Certipodium punctatum, this cigar orchid or the cowhorn orchid, whichever one you want to call it. They go by a lot of different names. The beastworm orchid. And one thing I did last week was me and my buddy went down to the swamp in South Florida. The precise location I'm gonna leave obscure on purpose, just because there are so very few of these left in the wild now, and I really don't want them to all disappear. But we went down there just as a fun thing to do. Every few years I go down there. I try and time it with the natural blooming of the native Certipodiums, and we were hoping to go see some in bloom, because I've got GPS coordinates of multiple log that I've followed and noticed over the years. Ooh, I'm in shade there. Sun behind you is not good, but I'll just use my blooming Certipodiums here as a good background. So what we did was we went down there, we made a day of it, went hiking for a few hours, got out to these remote locations. I mean, they're in the middle of nowhere. And that's what you got to do if you want to go out and see wild orchids. And like I said, there's multiple individuals that I've tracked over the last few years, probably since about 2017 or so. And many of them I've been to back over year after year, and they were doing pretty good. There was some that weren't doing well, and there's some that were doing pretty well. I've seen a few small ones, and I've seen a lot of big ones. And I wish I didn't have to be so Debbie Downer or disheartening, but our trip was very disheartening. I'll say that bluntly. We were kind of heartbroken when we got there. We spent most of the day walking around to these different locations in the swamp and waist-high water looking for these plants, and unfortunately we got to a lot of them, and a lot of them were dead, or very close to it, in the process of dying. So not only did we not get to see a lot of blooming ones, we only saw one blooming one, but many of them have perished, and it was so sad, so very disheartening, because these plants are very, very much endangered in their natural ecosystem here in South Florida. And we saw a lot of other orchids, but our main mission was to see some blooming Certipodium. And it was kind of mysterious there for a while. We were kind of trying to figure out what was killing them, because you could see the clumps. They're big masses from years past. All the bulbs were all dead and brown and just soft and rotten. And at the end of the day, we found one blooming one, which I knew is one plant that I had been to for year after year, and it had a really nice flower. It was right about chest height down there in the swamp, and you could easily see it and get to it. And when we found that plant, we found out that it was covered in Boyce Duval scale, which is a type of really, really damaging scale insect. That's it's the main scale that most orchid growers get in their collection. It's that real white fluffy scale. It's not mealybugs, but it's the little males tend to have that white fluffy cotton on them, and the females make the scale. But we found the blooming one that was right at eye level here, and you could tell just by the plant it was declining. And even though it had a bloom on it, closer inspection, we found all the scale covered over the base of the plant on the bulbs and on the new growth. So that was a little bit disheartening, and it makes me wonder if that's not what killed some of the larger individuals that we found that day. But I just wanted to talk about this, so I didn't do a very good job filming while I was there. I meant to, you know, to make a good video of it. But, you know, when you're trekking through miles and miles of waist-high water or knee-high water in some places, it gets really tiring. And, you know, I only had my phone with me, and you'll have to forgive me for, I did the biggest sin of all, is I recorded vertically. Catherine wasn't very happy about that, but, you know, I wasn't thinking about it at the time. And so I made some clips to show y'all some of the natural habitat, good or bad news. It's still good information for y'all to see, so y'all can see what's going on. You know, not many people get out to go down to these remote locations in the middle of yonder and the wild out there in the boonies. Not too many folks are willing to go out there, but I am definitely willing to go out there and look for these plants because I love them. But, you know, like I said, good or bad news, it's still news, and I want y'all to see it. But we saw some other cool stuff too. You know, we see a lot of other species of orchids down there, like the clamshell orchid, which was also heavily infested with the Boyce Duval scale, and also things like Epidendrum nocturnum. Those are like weeds. Those grow everywhere down there, and so do the dendrobium, the dingy star orchid, the dendrobium, or excuse me, not dendrobium, pardon me, Epidendrum amphiostomum, Epidendrum rigidum. Those are everywhere down there, along with the yellow helmet orchid. I don't even remember what genus that is, what genus that's in, but the yellow helmet orchid, that's everywhere. And of course the butterfly orchid. The butterfly orchid doesn't seem to be as abundant in the swamps as it is here in Central Florida. You see them, but not as many, because most of these cypress swamps tend to be a little bit shadier, especially in the sloughs where it's real deep. There's more foliage cover, and you know, even the cigar orchids, they're kind of restricted to these sloughs because this is where it's remote and they've not been, you know, destroyed from logging or development or just collecting. So a lot of times the cigar orchids that you do find are in these shadier locations that are not really ideal, and they are remnants of from when the swamp was logged, you know, going on 100 years ago, and they are now surviving in these little isolated pockets in the shade, whereas really some of the best individuals are out in the open and in more exposed locations, but those tend to be the ones that are easy to see, and people end up taking every one of them. So, or those open areas tend to get turned into housing development. So I'm gonna quit talking here, and hopefully y'all will get something out of it. It's not going to be a very long video. It's just a few short clips of us in the woods, but I wanted y'all to see it, and I want to give y'all a little background before we go to the videos. But while we're here and we're talking about it, let's just go ahead and we'll show you some of the Sodropodiums that are house blooming. So here's the punctatum, our biggest one, still with a few flowers left open. But this thing is massive, and you'll see I've already got to pollinating quite a few of them. And here's the other big one. This one's taking its sweet time. It's lagging behind the other one for some reason. But again, I've already done my due diligence of pollinating some of these. But that being said, punctatum or Sodropodium seed pods in general, they take about a year. They usually take about 11 to 12 months to ripen, to get the dry seed. So they take a long time, but I've done it many times now. And I love Sodropodiums. Unlike most orchids, they make most orchids do make a lot of seed, and it's really small. But Sodropodiums, they really just make a, they got to be close to 1 million seeds in a pod. I mean, they got big fat pods, and they're just loaded with seed when they come out. And their embryos are big for orchids. Most orchids have a really, we say microscopic. You can see the individual seeds with your naked eye, but it just looks like a speck. Where Sodropodiums, their seeds are usually almost big enough that you can almost see an embryo with your naked eye if you got good eyesight and you're up close to it. They're not as big as like vanilla seed or like some of the Epidendrum seeds. There's certain orchids that have a real big seed, and Sodropodium, it has a large seed for most orchids. and then make an abundance of them. But that's another weird thing. When you go down to the wild and you see the native ones, for whatever reason, you don't see a whole lot of seed pods. You know, I've been down there many years, seen many plants, and I've never seen a seed pod. I've seen photos online of people who have found them with seed pods, and that's hopeful. You know, the plants can't propagate and grow other places if there's no seed pods. And I believe one of the reasons may be that their natural pollinator, their main pollinator is a bee, you know, that mainly collects oil from a type of shrub that's native to Florida. And I'm not certain if maybe the pollinating main pollinator, that bee, has been disturbed in some way, as maybe the shrub's not locally abundant, or maybe just the pollinator's not locally abundant, undoubtedly due to human activity of some sort. But that being said, when I'm down there, I don't see a whole lot of visitation to the flowers. And like I said, I've yet to see a native plant with a pod on it, which is kind of concerning. But you know, I'm hopeful that there will be some will hang on, and the strongest will survive. They're resistant to the scale and resistant to anything else that may come their way, because it's such a alluring flower. It's so captivating. I don't know. Catherine asked me what I like about it, and I said, I don't know, I just love it. That's just true. I just love it. It's just amazing to me. Without further ado, we'll go on to the clips of the wild plants, because we can look at cultivated orchids all day, but what's really interesting is wild orchids. All right, guys, we're out here in the swamp looking for cowhorn or cigar orchids, Certipodiums. We were checking on some, and as sad as it is, it looks like there's a dead one here. This was a couple years ago. This was a nice plant, but I guess that's just the circle of life, you know. They don't all make it. And it's a little disheartening. You could tell it had a bunch of flower spikes at one point in time. But even the wild ones, they don't always make it. Alright guys, here you got a night blooming Epidendrum nocturnum, growing right here in the edge of this pond cypress, or bald cypress, or whichever tree it is. So out here in the cypress swamps, you'll find Epidendrum nocturnum growing, as well as Certipodium punctatum. Alright guys, here we found our first Breathtaking cucleata, also known as the octopus orchid or the clamshell orchid. So you can see here it's got some seed pods, so it's been pollinated, but it's just growing on the side of a pond apple here, a couple feet from the water line. And you know, thick, a somewhat dense canopy of pond or bald cypress, but during the winter this is going to be very bright exposed because they're deciduous. But just so y'all can see where the habitat they're growing. Alright guys, what's up? We finally found our first not heartbreak. We have a blooming Certipodium punctatum, and you can see here the old bulbs and the new growth coming out. Here is our flower. This one's got nice dark colors. They smell really good. And you know, today we found quite a few dead ones, and now we were looking at this and we're wondering, we think we might have found out why some of them are dying. We rubbed off as much as we could, but there is scale infesting these bulbs, and you know, apparently the Bois Duval scale is a not native scale, and the plant probably has very little resistance to it and not a lot of predators that may eat it. But this one here is still alive and kicking, and you can see how much light it's getting. It's a pretty bright area. The bald cypress are going to be really thinned out in the winter when there's no light, or when there's no foliage on the trees. But one of the ways we can tell it's declining is the oldest bulbs from years past are huge.
Yeah.
Are much larger than the newest bulbs.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully something comes along and
Planet hasn't been able to retain that many bulbs.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so sad, but still cool.
And I've watched this plant for the past few years, and a couple years ago this had much bigger spikes on it with more flowers. So I really hope this one makes a recovery and has a turnaround. We don't lose it like we've lost all the other ones that we've seen today. But there you go. You can see how the plant grows. It's on a bald cypress stump. The top half of the cypress is down here. It's just growing a couple feet above the water line with a bunch of detritus and duff layer that decays and breaks down, and that's usually where the best ones are. Alright guys, one last little look at my favorite plant in the whole wide world, Certipodium punctatum. Unfortunately, a lot of them have been dead, and we think we found out the cause based on this one is the Bois-Duval scale. So who knows if this will still be here next year, but there you go folks. That's what invasive species will do, whether it be plants, animals, or little mite creatures or bugs or whatever scale are. So just keep that in mind if you're wondering why there's not an abundance of native orchids anymore. Alright guys, here we are in one of the deep sloughs, and here you can see this is Epidendrum, I think it's Amphiostomum, the dingy star orchid. This is a real nice, we've seen quite a lot of this growing in these deeper areas with a little bit more canopy cover, so it's shadier. Growing nice and happy right there on its mossy log. And you can see there's plenty of water to provide ample humidity. That's the biggest one we've seen so far. Alright, so here is a wide shot of kind of the sloughs and kind of the habitat of some of these Florida natives. The more, humid loving species that are a little bit more confined to the swamps. There's the Blatea. You can see there's lots of pond apple and bald cypress. It's these deeper areas where there's constant water that the humidity stays higher, and that you see more of the orchids. You see some of them in the drier areas, but these more humid areas are definitely where they're locally abundant. Alright guys, here we are down here growing on this log here in the sloughs. We have what we believe to be Blatea purpurea, one of the native ground orchids. You can see the tall spike here. These flowers never really open up all that much. But there you go, folks. One of our native terrestrials. And they're fragrant too. Did you smell it?
Oh yeah?
Yeah, there it is, growing down there in that moss and detritus. Here we got another Prosthecia cochleata growing about a foot or two off of the floor with the water. Just a little bit of scale, not too much. This one's doing pretty good.